God damn.
This missile struck Kharkiv, Ukraine on January 2nd, 2024.
Oh, it's
And
recent.
immediately, something seemed off. It didn't look Russian. It was one of hundreds Russia fired over a 5-day span in its largest air attack since invading. But when experts in the US government took a closer look, they found it eerily matched photos of missiles made in North Korea.
We know their relationship is very good. And yeah, North Korea is going to support Russia with their military equipment from the sounds of it.
Russia had also fired dozens of these drones, which are made in Iran. And cruise missiles like these with wiring and turbojet engines from China. The appearance of these weapons in Ukraine isn't an accident. They're a key way these four countries are working together. And they're growing close enough that some in the US are beginning to call them an Axis. That's Axis like the Axis powers, who fought the US and its allies in the Second World War. And the Axis of evil that US President George W. Bush, well, made up.
States like these and their terrorist allies constitute an axis of evil, arming to threaten the peace of the world.
But I've been seeing this new axis described in a lot of different ways. There's the new axis of evil, the axis of rogues, of evasion, even of outcasts.
I think the name that best describes this groups of countries is the axis of upheaval. It's the big geopolitical shift that we've seen over the last several years.
So why is an autocratic mafia state, an Islamic theocracy, a communist superpower, and a reclusive socialist state teaming up?
Why are
And how
they?
much danger do they
Good
pose to
question.
the rest of the world?
It's mad because Ukraine is such a small country compared to like Russia, China. All these countries are massive and got so much superpower behind them. Ukraine's obviously got backing of like the US, NATO, so the UK, etc. in Europe. But it's hard, man. Russia's got... Then again, look, Ukraine's got so much weapons from the UK. Britain sent so much ammunition and weaponry to Ukraine to fight Russians. So it's only fair, really, that Russia is using their allies' equipment because they're allies, right? Same way we're providing Ukraine and other countries. America, I'm pretty sure, sent so much to Ukraine. Comment below about that. I'm pretty sure that's a fact.
The governments of China, Iran, Russia, and North Korea are very different states, but they do have a couple things in common. First, they're all trying to build their own spheres of influence. When Russia was part of the Soviet Union, it controlled much of Eastern Europe and Central Asia, largely thanks to its vast wealth, energy, technology, large military, nuclear weapons, and seat on the powerful UN Security Council. But after the Soviet Union fell, many of these countries left that sphere by joining the NATO alliance and European Union. Ever since Vladimir Putin took power, he's been destabilizing and even invading countries who are considering doing the same. Iran's Islamic regime, meanwhile, has wanted to become the most powerful in the Middle East ever since it rose to power in 1979. It used oil wealth to fund militias and amass thousands of missiles and drones in order to influence and threaten its neighbors. North Korea's first leader rose to power in the 1950s after a war split the Korean peninsula. And since then, he, his son, and now his grandson have built a massive military and nuclear weapons arsenal that they threaten to use to conquer South Korea. Finally, the Chinese Communist Party has been vowing to take over Taiwan since it rose to power in the 1940s. It built itself into a
Poor Taiwan. Look how small they are compared to China.
It's all these big countries trying to take over smaller countries.
Because apparently it's not enough. They
No.
always want more land and they just always want more power. It's crazy.
And like I said, look how tiny Taiwan is. It's even smaller than Ukraine.
And the USA are helping Taiwan at the moment.
yeah.
But let's be real, like China's right next door to them. The US will only hold out for so long. If Trump comes in power, will Trump continue the support for Taiwan? Because Trump's very like, we're not getting enough back from policing the world. So he might start withdrawing certain alliances and allowing things to happen unless America get, paid correctly or compensated correctly. So it's a lot of responsibility.
A superpower with vast wealth, a large military, nuclear weapons, and a seat on the UN Security Council. But it's expanded its ambitions to wield influence across all of Southeastern Asia.
Damn, it's a lot of land.
The second thing these four have in common is that the US has been thwarting their plans. It's been arming its allies to block these countries from expanding their influence, and they all hate it.
In many ways, the most
True.
powerful glue between those two countries is their shared animosity of the United States.
Andrea Kendall-Taylor is an expert on this new axis. Despite sharing an enemy, these four states weren't really all that close until the last decade or so, when the US began unleashing a powerful economic weapon. In the last few decades, the US has been increasingly placing what's called sanctions on its enemies.
Sanctions are a tool that the United States regularly wields to push back against actions that other countries take, but that obviously fall well short of military measures.
Sanctions weaken America's enemies by basically blocking trade to that country until it stops doing what the US doesn't like. Sometimes the US alone refuses to trade with a country, but it often gets its allies or even the whole UN to also agree to stop trading with it. And that can prevent...
That's what happened to Russia. That's where Russia got fucked with a lot of things, because they were relying on European countries and stuff for a lot of their supplies on, just general stuff. And now Russia has gone to a point where they've turned to other allies, but they've also sanctioned Europe, or, because they don't want to provide us. And that's why, fuel prices went up like crazy when the war started, because I believe Russia was a big player in that. And they said, you know what, you're sanctioning us, you're not getting none of our fuel. And then Britain had to go elsewhere, and so did a lot of Europe. So it's that economic war as well as physical war.
It affects everything. It's not just a fact of this country wants to take over that one. Okay, you want to take over, we're going to stop
Our
selling
allies
you.
will stop selling this, that. It's crazy.
a country from getting things it really needs. To punish North Korea for its nuclear program, the UN has placed sanctions that have led to severe shortages of energy, technology, and food, contributing to deadly famines and crippling its economy. Sanctions on Iran have blocked it from selling its oil, leaving it short of cash, while also preventing it from getting the advanced weaponry it needs to match its rivals in the Middle East. Sanctions are one of the key reasons why these states began to work together. Since the 1980s, Iran's been buying missiles from North Korea, and in the last decade, North Korea has been buying Iranian oil. China has also been buying Iranian oil and trading with North Korea, which it views as a troublesome but useful ally. But when Russia invaded Ukraine, it took their cooperation to a whole new level.
Breaking news, Ukraine under attack. Ukraine woke to explosions around
That's
the
nuts.
capital, Kiev.
2 years since the Russian President Vladimir Putin ordered his troops to invade Ukraine.
The Ukrainian losses in comparison to their population are pretty significant.
Putin is finished. He's doubled down on everything.
This guy is losing. Russia, I think, is literally running out of ammunition. They're seeking some support and some ammunition.
Russia has used up huge amounts of ammunition, weapons, and equipment in Ukraine, and sanctions placed by the US and its allies have made it difficult for it to replace them. Additionally, many Western countries have stopped buying Russia's oil, leaving it also short of cash.
Suddenly, Russia needs a lot of help, but very few countries are willing to give it any, except for three. And it just so happens that Iran, North Korea, and China all have something it desperately needs. That's why I made these cards. Hopefully, they're an interesting way to show you what each country has to
I like
offer.
the cards. Makes
Because
it
at the very heart
easy.
of this new axis are transactions.
Russia convinced North Korea to begin sending it millions of rounds of ammunition and missiles. It also got Iran to send it missiles, plus thousands of drones.
Russia had to turn to these countries out of necessity. It is very consequential and important what Russia is getting, but just as important is what Russia is having to give away in return.
It seems like Russia got desperate because obviously they were very reliant on the pre-sanction equipment and the supplies they were getting. But lucky for them, they had a
Other
place to
allies,
turn.
Yeah.
And I don't think there were allies like that. But after this war, and they all have a common interest, it allowed them to say, you know what, you got what we need, we got what you want. Let's work together and let's strengthen our allyship or friendship. And it's led to this.
Because each country has what the other country doesn't
Needs.
have or need.
This is the thing. When Russia used all their supplies, the other countries had the ammunition and stuff. But at the same time, the other countries needed things. So lucky for Russia, they had what the other countries needed just in general. So they said, you know what, we'll give you this, the supplies and the weaponry, but in return from Russia, we want that thing you have, and Russia are more than happy to give it because they got nowhere else to turn at the moment. So it works out for everyone's favor. Now they become best friends.
Yeah.
And it's a danger to the US and other countries.
Russia has become Iran's largest source of foreign investment.
There we go.
And it's now sending Iran very advanced weaponry like fighter jets and attack helicopters.
Oh my God.
Russia is also sending more food and energy to North Korea, plus advanced technology that it can use in its weapons. But neither state has helped Russia as much as China has. It's been buying lots of Russian oil, injecting billions of dollars into Russia's.
That's the oil we suffered on, and our prices in the UK went up like crazy.
Yep.
China's fuel prices probably went down like crazy.
Coffers. And it's sending Russia what's called dual-use products. Those are things that can be used for both commercial or military purposes.
Made in China.
So while it's not accurate to say China is sending Russia weapons, many of these dual-use products are ending up in Russian weapons, like navigation equipment, jamming technology, jet fighter parts, and even drone parts. In exchange, Russia's been sending China more sophisticated technology, possibly for things like submarines and missile defense systems. By fulfilling each other's needs, Russia, Iran, and North Korea are able to survive despite being sanctioned. And all four are improving their ability to carve out spheres of influence. A win-win-win-win. Iranian drones and North Korean ammunition have helped Russia bog down Ukraine's counteroffensives, while Russian weapons have bolstered Iran's defenses. And its technology is believed to have helped North Korea build more advanced ICBM missiles. But while Russian technology and Iranian oil does help China, it's not involved in this axis to make trades.
There's certainly pragmatic, kind of tangible things that China is getting, but more than anything else, I think it is China wants to build a world that it thinks is more favorable to China, and in that pursuit, Russia is an extremely useful partner.
Yeah.
As China strives to become more powerful, the US is using its vast system of allies to contain it. So backing these states is a way for China to distract and threaten the US in more places. And it's even using its seat on the Security Council to thwart the US's agenda. It recently teamed up with Russia to block new sanctions on North Korea and block the US's call for a ceasefire in Gaza.
Could this axis survive without China?
I think it would just be far less impactful. It's the resources really that China brings to this that makes this axis of upheaval so concerning.
The concern is that China could use this axis to undermine the entire US-led world order, hence the axis of upheaval.
But when you think about what upheaval is, it really is acts designed to overturn an existing order, and I think that's precisely what these four countries are trying to do. They're trying to overturn the rules, the norms, the institutions that have underpinned the world that we live in today.
China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea feel that those rules are being used to weaken them. So by teaming up, they could begin...
It kind of makes sense as well why they are so close relationship with Donald Trump, because when he was in presidency, he had very good relations with Vladimir Putin, very good relationships with China, with
North
Korea, all of these people. And they looked at him as an ally. And it kind of makes sense why, because maybe he was a bit more lenient on, allowing them to do certain actions. And then, now that Joe Biden's in place, he's been, from my understanding, being a lot more stricter with these regulations, and they hate him for it, and they already don't like the US. But I think Trump was their middleman that kind of made their relationship a bit better with the US, and they like Trump, and
The thing is, Trump is a businessman.
In the world of business, that's it. That's all it is.
So his mindset would be very different as opposed to Joe Biden.
And a lot of you guys commented in previous videos when Trump was in leadership, the economy was at a very good position compared to now. Correct me if I'm wrong, guys, or if that's, it's still the case, but I've seen that from a lot of Americans in the comment section. So like you said, he's a businessman, and probably all these trades and agreements he had with these countries allowed that to happen. And I think in one of Trump's speeches, he mentioned when he was in presidency, not one person in one of the wars that died since he put the order in, because they respected him. But as soon as that happened, Russia took over Ukraine, all these things started to happen because they said, you know what, why not?
Begin to build a new system based on how they want to rule.
They have that idea that there is no universal definition of democracy or human rights, or the idea that no outside state should have the right to interfere in the internal affairs of another state. Basically, code for the United States can't push democracy on human rights in other countries because that's undermining to other autocracies.
The risk for the US is that they might convince other autocracies who agree to join their axis, perhaps even some states that are more neutral, creating a group large enough to compete with the US-led order. Andrea believes that competition is already beginning to spark violence.
We had a flare-up in Armenia, Azerbaijan. Venezuela has threatened to take parts of Guyana by force. And certainly we have the conflict in the Middle East. And I worry very much that it is in large part because we are moving towards this world where it's not just the US-led order, but these two competing orders.
For now, this axis is far from being an alternative world order or even an alliance. Its leaders have been meeting each other more frequently and signing agreements, but they're not promising to defend each other, nor have they all met at the same time. But by even offering a possible alternative to the US-led system, this axis is already putting more pressure on the US to back its allies, like Taiwan, South Korea, Israel, and most urgently, Ukraine, which this axis would like to see defeated.
All of these countries would like to see Russia win in Ukraine, because then Russia has demonstrated to the rest of the world that might makes right, that you can change borders through the use of force, and the United States power, the power of its allies, can be defeated, it can be overcome.
And that the four of these states have figured out how to do it.
That also makes sense why countries like Britain and, like NATO in general and the US are so keen on making sure Ukraine have everything they need to defend themselves. Because like she said, if Russia do win this, it's going to demonstrate to the world that even with the world's superpowers, power and mighty force can overcome and win, meaning other countries are going to start doing the same because it's a demonstration. That's probably why America are so engaged in making sure this doesn't happen, because if it does happen, it could lead to loads of other situations like this,
which they don't want.
Yeah.
If, like you say, if Russia takes over Ukraine, it will show the rest of the countries, America and Britain didn't do anything about that.
Or they didn't, but they did something, but it wasn't enough. It wasn't enough.
Yeah, so let's go take over these other countries that we want to.
And if we have Russia having our backing,
yeah,
they done it there, I'm sure they can help us do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all it is. It's crazy, isn't it?
Why not join them?
Yeah, it's nuts.